The cowboy had turned away every woman from one end of the valley to the other, never letting anyone close, never letting a single heart touch his own. Yet when she stepped into the doorway with the winter wind at her back and asked if he wanted a wife or another winter alone, something inside him shifted like the earth itself, changing beneath his boots. The morning sun rose slow over the far hills, brushing gold across the quiet town, while the cowboy saddled his horse in steady silence, his movements smooth and practiced as though nothing in the world could shake his calm. The stable hands watched him with a mix of respect and wonder, for no one understood why he kept to himself, turning down offers, glances, hopes, and every curious heart that tried to reach him. He rode through town with a straight back and even breath, and each of the shopkeepers waved as he passed, but he answered only with a small nod, his hat shadowing eyes that rarely revealed what he felt inside. Folks said he carried old memories heavy as iron, and that he had vowed never to let anyone share the weight with him. The afternoon wind swept through the streets, pushing dust across the wooden walkways, and the townsfolk gathered near the mercantile, where talk was easy and stories flowed as free as river water. They spoke of the cowboy again, wondering who might someday break through his silence. But the cowboy heard none of it. He spent his time on the open range, herding cattle, mending fence lines, moving with the rhythm of the land itself, each day passing in quiet, steady work as the sky stretched endlessly above him. One evening, as the sun slipped behind the jagged ridge and painted the clouds with soft fire, he returned to town for supplies. He tied his horse near the porch of the mercantile and stepped inside, his boots echoing on the wooden floor, and there she stood. She was new to the valley, her eyes sharp with understanding, as if she could see straight through dust, wind, and stubborn pride. She carried a strength in her posture that spoke of someone who had weathered her own share of storms. She watched him approach with a calm that surprised him, and for the first time in years he found himself pausing mid-step. She asked if he needed help finding anything, and though her voice was gentle, it carried a firmness that unsettled the quiet he had wrapped around himself. He answered with short words, careful and distant, but she simply smiled as though she had expected nothing more. Days passed and he saw her again and again, sweeping the porch, arranging goods, talking with townsfolk, listening with a patience he had not seen in others, and she greeted him each time with steady eyes, never pushing, never prying, simply meeting him where he stood. Winter approached with sharp winds whispering through the valley, and one night the cowboy returned late from the range, snowflakes settling on his coat. As he walked toward the warm glow of the mercantile lantern, she stood there in the doorway, arms folded against the cold, watching him with a look that felt like truth. He stopped a few steps away, unsure of why his breath came slower, unsure of why her presence held him still. She stepped closer, letting the warm lantern light spill across her face, and she asked the question that struck deeper than any blade. "You want a wife or another winter alone?" The wind stilled as if listening. The snow drifted softly between them, and the cowboy felt something shift inside him, a long locked door opening, just a crack the weight he carried pressed against his ribs, and he looked away, unable to speak. She did not fill the silence, she did not rush him, she simply waited, the snow gathering at her boots, the light catching the calm strength in her eyes, until he finally raised his head again. He tried to speak, but the words tangled in the weight of his past, and she stepped closer, laying a gentle hand on his arm, steady and sure, telling him that choosing companionship was not weakness, and that even the strongest rider on the range could not outrun winter forever. The cowboy let out a slow breath, one that seemed to release years of quiet hurt and bound up memory, and he nodded just enough for her to see, though his voice still refused to form a single word. She smiled, not triumphantly but softly, with the kind of understanding that eased the cold from a man's bones, and in that moment something deep and quiet passed between them, a promise shaped not by words but by shared resolve. The snow continued falling across the valley, covering the roofs, the ranges, the winding roads, and as the night settled peacefully around them, the cowboy realized that for the first time in years he did not feel the winter pressing him into loneliness. He felt the warmth of a choice waiting patiently beside him, a choice that might carry him through the cold and into something he had once believed he would never hold again. And so he stood there, letting the snow settle on his hat, letting her presence settle in his heart, knowing that the long winter ahead would not be faced alone. If you want more, I can continue the story in the same smooth style until we reach the full length. You won't just say continue.